The Meridian Tower cast its long shadow over King Street West, just as the first snow of November began to fall. The kind of fine, indifferent snow that coats everything equally, the black coats of Bay Street lawyers and the torn sleeping bags in doorways alike. Walter Holt did not notice the snow. He noticed very little outside the 42nd floor anymore. At 61, Walter had the particular posture of a man who had spent 4 decades being right. Shoulders back, chin level, eyes that moved through a room like a camera panning for relevance. He had built Holt Capital from a single office in Mississauga into one of the largest private equity firms in Ontario. He had outlasted 2 recessions, 1 divorce, and more partners than he could honestly name without checking a spreadsheet. His assistant, a careful young man named Trevor, pre-read his emails and flagged only what required a decision. Walter liked it that way. He had spent too many years making decisions that other people should have handled themselves. On the morning of November 7th, Walter arrived at the Meridian Tower at 7:43, which was later than usual. He had slept poorly. His daughter, Vivienne, was not speaking to him again. Something about Thanksgiving, something about him checking his phone at the table, something about a pattern she had identified in therapy that she needed him to acknowledge. He had not acknowledged it. He had said, "Vivienne, I drove 3 hours to be at that table," and she had said, "That's not the same as being present," and then the call had ended, and the apartment had been very quiet. He pushed through the revolving door and nodded at the security desk without slowing down. The lobby of the Meridian was all pale granite and tall glass, the kind of space designed to tell you exactly what kind of building you were entering before you had time to wonder. Walter moved toward the elevator bank on the left, the executive bank, the one that required a key card, and did not stop below the 30th floor. He was pressing his card to the reader when he heard it. "Please don't go in there." He turned. Standing near the base of the marble planter, the enormous one with the ficus that the building management replaced every season, was a child. A boy, maybe 11, maybe 12, small for whatever age he was. He wore a jacket that had been a school jacket once, green with a cracked crest on the breast pocket, but it was 2 sizes too large, and the cuffs were dark with grime. His sneakers were not winter sneakers. He had a canvas bag over one shoulder, the reusable grocery kind, stuffed to an awkward shape. His eyes were fixed on Walter with an expression that was difficult to read, not begging exactly, not the performance of need that Walter had trained himself to walk past in 20 years of downtown Toronto commutes. It was something more considered than that, urgent and quiet at the same time. "Excuse me," Walter said. "That elevator," the boy said. "Please don't take it." Walter looked at the elevator, then back at the boy. The lobby security guard, a broad man named Dennis, whose name Walter knew only because Trevor had once mentioned it, was watching from across the room with the particular attention of someone deciding whether to intervene. "Son," Walter said, choosing the word without thinking about it, "this elevator requires a key card. How did you get into this building?" "Through the side door by the loading dock," the boy said. "It doesn't latch properly. I've been sleeping there on cold nights." Walter stared at him. The boy did not flinch. He was shivering slightly, not the dramatic shiver of someone performing cold, but the involuntary, persistent tremor of a body that had been cold for a long time and was no longer surprised by it. "You've been sleeping in this building," Walter said. "In the alcove by the loading dock, yeah, it's dry, and the vent from the parkade runs warm." He paused. "I'm not stealing anything. I just needed somewhere dry." Dennis was moving toward them now. Walter held up a hand without turning around, and Dennis stopped. A small power, barely worth noting, but it worked. "Why?" Walter said slowly. "Are you telling me not to take the elevator?" "Because I heard one of the maintenance guys this morning saying the cable inspection got skipped last month." He was talking on the phone. He sounded worried. He said something about the 42nd floor counterweight. The boy shifted the canvas bag on his shoulder. "You were going to press 42. I could tell because you were heading for the left bank, not the right. Only executives go to the left bank. And you look like a 42 kind of person." Walter said nothing for a moment. "A 42 kind of person," he repeated. "No offense." Walter looked at the elevator. He looked at the boy. He looked at Dennis, who had retreated back to the desk but was still watching, and at the 2 young analysts in wool coats who had stopped a careful distance away, pretending to look at their phones. He stepped away from the elevator bank. "Come with me," he said to the boy. I'm not in trouble. That depends entirely on what you tell me in the next 10 minutes. Walter moved toward the seating area near the coffee kiosk. 3 low chairs around a glass table, the kind of furniture lobbies have so that visitors feel they are being treated as guests rather than suppliants. Sit down. Are you hungry? The boy sat. Yes, he said, without the hesitation that pride sometimes puts between a question and an honest answer. Walter ordered 2 coffees from the kiosk, and after a moment's consideration, 2 of the blueberry scones that he had always considered overpriced and unnecessary. He brought them to the table and sat across from the boy. What's your name? Owen, the boy said. Owen Baxter. Walter Holt. He did not extend his hand immediately. He was watching Owen's face the way a person watches something they are trying to understand. How long have you been sleeping in the loading dock, Owen? Owen was working through the scone with a focused attention that made Walter feel something he could not immediately name. Not pity. He had felt pity, and it was a more comfortable emotion than this. This was closer to shame, or to the precursor of shame, the moment before you understand what you should feel. About 6 weeks, Owen said, and before that, a shelter on Sherborne. But they had a capacity issue, and before that, my mom's place in Brampton. But that's... He paused, chose a word carefully. That situation changed. Where is your mother now? Owen looked down at the scone. She's dealing with some things, he said. She's trying. Walter had heard that phrase before, from social workers, from case files he had reviewed as part of a charitable board he sat on. The kind of board he joined because his accountant suggested the optics and stayed on because, unexpectedly, it had made him feel less hollow on certain Sundays. He knew what she's trying meant in the geometry of a child sleeping in a loading dock in November. How old are you? 11. 12 in February, and you're not in school. I was, until the shelter. It's hard to. Owen stopped. Started again. The school in the shelter's catchment area was full. There's a list. Walter set down his coffee. Outside, through the lobby glass, the snow was falling with more intention now, the flakes larger and slower, the kind that actually accumulate. A woman in a parka pushed a stroller past the door, angled against the wind. He thought about Vivienne, about Thanksgiving, about the particular quality of silence in his apartment at 10:30 on a Tuesday night when there was nothing that needed his decision. Owen, he said, tell me something. The maintenance worker. Did you hear which company? Did you see a uniform? Owen thought. Blue jacket, said Meridian Facilities on the back. Walter took out his phone and called Trevor. Get me the head of facilities management for this building. Direct line. I need it in the next 2 minutes. He hung up. The elevator will be checked, he said to Owen. Whatever you heard, I'll make sure it's looked at today. Owen nodded. He had finished the scone and was holding the paper bag it had come in with the careful tidiness of someone who had learned to leave spaces as they found them. What were you planning to do today? Walter asked. There's a library on St. Clair. It opens at 9. I can be there until 6. Every day? Most days. It's warm, and there's Wi-Fi. Walter was quiet for a moment. His phone buzzed Trevor with the facilities number. He forwarded it to himself and did not pick up. Owen, he said, I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer me honestly, not the way you think I want to be answered. Do you understand? Owen looked at him steadily. Yeah. Is your mother a danger to you? No, Owen said immediately. Then, she loves me. She's not okay right now. She's trying to get okay. She told me to go, actually. She cried when she told me. She gave me the bag and $40, and she said she'd come get me as soon as she could, but she needed me somewhere safe first because where she was going, I couldn't come. Where did she go? A treatment program. In Guelph. He said it plainly, the word treatment sitting in the sentence without apology. 90 days. Walter did a calculation he was not proud of doing. 90 days from when? How many had passed? What was $40 in a city like Toronto in November for a 12-year-old with no fixed address? He picked up his phone again and called Trevor back. Cancel my 8:30, he said, and find me the number for the Children's Aid intake line, and also, he paused, looked at Owen. Do you know which treatment center in Guelph? Owen reached into the canvas bag and produced a folded piece of paper, a discharge form, creased from handling, with a facility name and a caseworker contact printed at the top. He slid it across the table without being asked. Walter read it. Also get me the contact information for the Willow Creek Recovery Center in Guelph. I need to speak with their admissions coordinator, not to obtain information, just to leave a message that a family member wants to be in contact. He paused again. And Trevor. Order some food, actual food, whatever the restaurant downstairs has for breakfast. Enough for two. He could hear Trevor recalibrating on the other end of the line. Trevor was very good at recalibrating. It was why Walter had kept him for 6 years. Yes, Mr. Holt, Trevor said. The facilities call confirmed what Owen had heard. A cable tension check on the left elevator bank had been deferred twice due to a scheduling conflict with the inspection contractor. The head of facilities, a harried woman named Sherry, who spoke with the compressed urgency of someone who had been managing crises since before breakfast, assured Walter it would be corrected before end of day. He told her it would be corrected before noon, or the building management company would be hearing from his legal team, which was perhaps an aggressive position. But the elevator was now cordoned with orange tape before his coffee had gone cold, so he felt it had been appropriate. Owen watched all of this from across the table with a careful neutrality that reminded Walter uncomfortably of himself. The breakfast arrived: eggs, toast, fruit, a carafe of orange juice, and Owen ate with the same focused attention as the scone, neither rushed nor self-conscious, just hungry and eating. Walter drank his coffee and thought about his 42nd floor and all the decisions that awaited him up there, and found that none of them seemed as pressing as they had at 7:43. You said you like the library, Walter said. I like the computers mostly, but also the reading. I finished all the Terry Fox books they have, and I've been going through the Canadian history section. He said this without self-congratulation, just as information. There's a lot about the residential schools I didn't know. What grade were you in? 6. I was good at math. A small pause. I am good at math. Present tense. Walter almost smiled. Present tense, he agreed. He had been on the board of a not-for-profit called the Steadfast Foundation for 3 years. It had been founded by a retired teacher from Hamilton, who had, in her 60s, become so troubled by the number of children in Ontario aging out of foster care, with no support, that she had simply begun driving teenagers to job interviews in her own car. The organization had grown from that. It now operated 2 transitional housing facilities, a tutoring program in 6 school boards, and a food security initiative that Walter had personally funded a portion of because the numbers had made him feel a specific kind of cold that had nothing to do with weather. He knew the executive director. He could make a call, but that was not what stopped him from ending the conversation right there and going upstairs. What stopped him was something harder to name, the particular weight of Owen sliding that folded piece of paper across the table without being asked. The way a person who has been managing alone for too long still has the instinct to cooperate, to produce documentation, to prove they are not a problem. Walter's daughter was 34. When she was 12, he had been building the Mississauga office and traveling to Calgary every other week. He knew, in the careful way a man knows things he has not fully processed, that there were years he had been physically present for and emotionally absent from. He knew that Vivienne had once told a school counselor that her father was very busy. He knew this because her mother had told him, not at the time, but years later, in the particular way that people deploy information after it has aged into something more than complaint. He was not trying to correct history. He was 61 years old, and he understood that history does not correct. But Owen was 11, and present tense, and had 6 weeks of loading docks behind him, and 70-some days until his mother came back, assuming everything went well in Guelph, and the library on St. Clair closed at 6. Walter called his daughter at 8:47, which was earlier than he had ever called her, early enough that she answered with a slightly alarmed, "Dad?" expecting emergency. "I'm fine," he said. "I'm in the lobby of my building. I wanted to say that you were right about Thanksgiving. I was checking my phone. I do that when I don't know what to say, and I should just say that I don't know what to say, and I am working on that, or I will work on it. I don't have a better answer than that right now." Vivienne was quiet for a moment. "Okay," she said, with the careful intonation of someone receiving something unexpected and deciding whether to trust it. "I'll call you tonight," he said. "For longer. I'll put my phone in the other room." He hung up and looked at Owen, who was politely pretending to study the middle distance. "Sorry," Walter said. "It's okay," Owen said. "Family's complicated." "Yes," Walter said, "it is." He made 3 more calls before 9 o'clock. The first was to the Steadfast Foundation, where he reached the executive director's voicemail and left a message explaining the situation in enough detail to be useful and asking that someone call him back before noon. The second was to a family lawyer he knew, not a close friend but a reliable one, to ask a quiet question about the legal landscape when a child in care of a parent in a treatment program had fallen through the reporting cracks and what options existed that did not immediately escalate to formal apprehension if the parent's treatment compliance was strong. The third call was to Trevor, to cancel the rest of his morning. At 9:15, Walter took Owen to the Meridian's boardroom on the 5th floor, which had tall windows overlooking King Street and a whiteboard that Owen immediately looked at with the expression of a person who finds whiteboards interesting. Walter asked him to show him, roughly, what kind of math he'd been doing in grade 6. Owen went to the whiteboard and, without ceremony, began writing out a long division problem he had been working through in his head on the walk from the loading dock that morning. Something about calculating how many nights his $40 could realistically stretch if he spent $2 on transit per day and needed to eat once per day from the Tim Hortons where the manager didn't ask questions. He had been thinking about it in fractions. Walter watched him work through it and felt the particular quality of attention that very good problems produce. Not just sympathy, not just admiration, but something closer to recognition. "You have the instinct," Walter said, when Owen set the marker down. "For what? For finding the actual problem inside the problem." Owen looked at the whiteboard. "My teacher, Mr. Ibarra, said that. That's how he said it. That I go past the question to the question behind it." He was right. The Steadfast Foundation called back at 11:20. Not a voicemail response, but the executive director herself, Ruth Escobar, who had built the organization from a car full of teenagers and who did not, in Walter's experience, waste time. She listened to the summary he gave and asked 6 precise questions, and then said she would have a placement coordinator at the Meridian by 2 o'clock. She also said, "Walter, this is the 4th time in 3 years you've called me about a specific child rather than about funding." "Yes," he said. "I'm noting that," she said, in a tone that was neither criticism nor approval, but something adjacent to both. By 2 o'clock, Owen had eaten lunch from the restaurant downstairs, had filled 3 pages of a legal pad with problems he and Walter had worked through together in the boardroom, and had fallen asleep in the large chair by the window, with his canvas bag on his lap, his chin dropped to his chest, in the absolute stillness of someone whose body had been waiting for permission to rest. Walter sat at the table and did not make noise. He looked at the canvas bag, the folded discharge paper, a library card, a change of clothes visible through the zipper gap, a paperback with a worn spine, and thought about his daughter at 12, and the counselor she had told that her father was very busy, and the specific quality of being 11 years old and very good at math and working out survival in fractions. Ruth Escobar arrived at 2:10 with a placement coordinator named Jules, who was brisk and kind in equal measure, and who woke Owen gently and explained the options with the clarity of someone who understood that clarity was its own form of respect. There was a family resource home in Scarborough with a couple who had been fostering for 11 years, currently with capacity, currently with a 13-year-old who also liked math. The school catchment area covered a junior high that Walter's Foundation had funded a tutoring program in. There would be paperwork. There would be a period of adjustment. These things were not simple. Owen listened to all of it with the same careful attention he had given the whiteboard. At the end, he asked 2 questions: whether he could keep his library card active at the St. Clair branch, and whether the family resource home had Wi-Fi. Both answers were yes. Before Jules took Owen to the car, Owen stood in the boardroom doorway and looked at Walter with an expression that was considering something. "The elevator," he said. "Did they actually fix it?" "The inspection is scheduled for this afternoon," Walter said. "Sherry from facilities texted me at noon." Owen nodded, apparently satisfied by the specificity of this. "Thank you," he said, "for the scone, and for not just," he stopped, "for not just walking past," Walter said. "Thank you for saying something. A lot of people wouldn't have." Owen looked at him with the measuring quality he had carried since the lobby. "You looked like you might actually stop," he said. "Some people don't look like they'd stop. You did a little." He followed Jules out. Walter stood at the boardroom window and watched. The King Street sidewalk below where the afternoon snow had turned to slush, and the city moved through it with the particular determination of people who live somewhere winter, is not optional. He thought about the elevator cable. He thought about 42 floors and the absence of a tension check. He thought about the distance between the things that almost happen and the things that do. He called Vivienne that evening from his kitchen, phone face down on the counter across the room, and talked for an hour and 20 minutes. Longer than they had talked in years, about nothing in particular and everything that mattered. She cried a little, somewhere in the middle, and he did not rush the silence that followed it. He just held the phone and let it be what it was. Over the following months, Walter restructured his charitable giving in a way his accountant initially questioned, and then, upon reflection, stopped questioning. The Steadfast Foundation received a significant endowment that funded 3 new family resource placements in the Toronto area. Walter joined the board, not for the optics this time, but because Ruth Escobar asked him directly, and he found to his own surprise that he wanted to be asked directly about things that mattered. Owen's mother completed her program in Guelph in February, 2 weeks after Owen turned 12. The reunification was not immediate. These things move at the speed of systems, which is slow, and of trust, which is slower, but it moved. Owen stayed in the Scarborough placement through the school year, which meant he finished grade 6 with a math teacher who recognized immediately what Mr. Ibarra had recognized, and said so in the report card in terms that Owen read 3 times in the kitchen of the resources home and then folded into his canvas bag. Walter learned all of this in pieces, through Ruth, through Jules, through the quarterly updates the foundation sent to its board members. He did not insert himself into Owen's life in ways that were not his to occupy. He understood the difference between helping and hovering, or he was learning it, which is perhaps as much as can honestly be said of anyone. In April, Owen sent him a letter through the foundation's office. Not an email, a letter, handwritten on notebook paper, the lines slightly uneven in the way of someone writing carefully. It said, "I've been thinking about what you said, about finding the actual problem inside the problem. My teacher here says I have a talent for it. I've been thinking maybe I want to do something with that when I'm older, something where it matters. I wanted to tell you that what you did in the lobby was the problem behind the problem. The cable was the problem on the surface, but you stopped. That was the one underneath." Walter read it twice at his kitchen table on a Sunday morning in April when the snow was finally gone and the first light of a Canadian spring was coming through the window at a low angle that made everything look briefly, temporarily, like it might be possible. He folded it carefully and put it in the inner pocket of his coat, where he would find it again on Tuesday morning, pressing a key card against an elevator reader on King Street West, and remember that some problems announce themselves quietly, in loading dock doorways, to anyone who is paying the right kind of attention.